Google Analytics disappeared from my list of trackers to block. That whoever's maintaining the subscription removed it. And so if you think about like the old way, the old world of how things worked, you imagine there was some shady backroom deal where some Google executive tracked down this guy and showed up with a briefcase full of cash, and they shook hands, and he removed the Google Analytics from the list of trackers. But actually, as far as I can tell, something much more interesting happened. Google Analytics works via JavaScript, where if you have a website and you wish to use Google Analytics, you just import a little bit of JavaScript into your web page, and that does everything for you. And so when you block Google Analytics, you just block that JavaScript from loading. And Google started putting generic JavaScript functions into their Google Analytics code. And so the rationale is, hey, you guys are importing this JavaScript anyway. We're just going to throw in a few kind of useful generic JavaScript functions that you might want to use as long as you're importing this JavaScript. And so what happened was people started using that. And now, if you block Google Analytics, you don't just break the analytics, you break the functionality of the website. Because people are depending on this JavaScript to have their website operate at all. And so what they've done is they've expanded the scope of the choice that you have to make. It used to be a very small choice. Do I want to be tracked by Google or not? That's a pretty simple choice. You block JavaScript from the Google Analytics stuff. But now they've expanded the scope of the choice, so it's, do I want to use this website at all or not? And that becomes a much more difficult choice. So why is this significant for us, this concept of choice? This man's name is John Poindexter. And he's incidentally the person who was found to be most responsible for the Iran-Contra scandal. He was convicted of lying to Congress, but never went to jail. And in 2001, he started this program called Total Information Awareness. When he announced this program, he said that data must be made available in large-scale repositories with enhanced semantic content for easy analysis. What he essentially wanted to do was siphon off all email traffic, all web traffic, all credit card history, everybody's medical records, take everything out of the internet and throw it into one big sink, one big pile, without worrying about analyzing it in real time or trying to make sense of the data as it was coming in. And then he wanted to develop technology to easily mine this data, to pull out the statistics, the relationships, the correlations, patterns, profiles at any later time. So you could always go back and get all the information you needed about somebody, right? And so this was like the totalitarian future. This was the cypherpunk nightmare. This is what everybody had been worried about and preparing for. And so people freaked out. I mean, this was a big deal, to the point where even people in Congress freaked out and were like, what are you guys doing? And the program was shut down. Well, so why did people freak out, right? Well, I mean, if we look at this, clearly these people are from the old world. They don't really know what they're doing. This was their actual logo that they chose for their program. This isn't like The Onion came up with a logo for the thing. This was the actual thing they chose. There's the pyramid with the eye of God and a light beam shining down on the entire planet. That bit of Latin under there means knowledge is power. I mean, these, if you're going to have some scary government program like this, you need like a friendly logo, something like this, right? Don't call it total information awareness. Call it like the Kitten Surveillance Society or something, I mean, what you want is something almost cartoonish, something colorful and playful, something that seems friendly and almost childish, right? Something like this. Because really, if you go back and you look at what Total Information Awareness was trying to do, Google has done all of these things and more. They've they've gone beyond the scope of what TIA wanted. I mean, they're collecting all of these things and they're keeping them forever. And if there's one thing that Google has really excelled at doing, it's at making sense of large repositories of data, of being able to sift through all of that and pull out the statistics and relationships and profiles that they're looking for. Now, of course, Google's intent is different. They're not John Poindexter. They're trying to sell advertising. But make no mistake about it, they are in the surveillance business. That is how they make money, by surveilling you and using that information. And so the effect is the same, right? But there's this quote, who knows more about the citizens in their own country, Kim Jong-il or Google? I think it's pretty clearly Google. But again, there's this question of why are people so afraid of Kim Jong-il? Why are people so afraid of the John Poindexters of the world? And yet, Google, who knows much more, is not as scary. Well, again, yeah, I think it comes back to choice, right? That we choose to use Google, whereas we don't choose to be surveilled by Kim Jong-il or John Poindexter. But again, I think that this choice is expanding, right? The scope of this choice is expanding, such that it's becoming harder and harder to not participate. And eventually, I think it will expand to the point where, again, it is a choice between participating in society or not. I mean, already, if you were to decide, well, I don't want to participate in Google, so I'm not going to email anybody that has a Gmail account. You would be removed from some part of the social narrative, right? You would be unable to communicate with some part of society, and that is going to continue to grow and expand. Yes. So I think the trends have changed, right? I would say that now we have technology that actually alters society. It changes the fabric of society and how people communicate. And that as a result, information accumulates in really distinct places, and that then eavesdroppers just move to those points of accumulation, right? So the past was this direct reality, right? You saw people trying to embed surveillance electronics into every piece of consumer communications electronics, right? That was a really direct thing. And the present is much more subtle, right? Instead of doing that, they just move to the few points where information naturally accumulates, right? Places like room 641A in the AT&T WorldCom facility, where the NSA has been operating a fiber optic splitter for a long time. The past was direct. You saw things like total information awareness, where they wanted to directly take your data and start analyzing it. And the present is much more subtle, right? That you volunteer your data to these places, it accumulates there, and then the eavesdroppers just move to those points, right? So when I think about the future and what I'm interested in working on in the future, the first thing that comes to mind is that I want to start dealing with the choices that aren't really choices, I want to acknowledge that these choices are expanding and that eventually they become demands. And I want to start to address that. So some projects that I'm working on in that light and that other people are working on in that light. The first thing I thought about was, okay, so what's the deal with Google, really? What's going on there? The big problem is that they have a lot of information. They know everything about you. They record all of this stuff. They know who your friends are, where you live, where you work. They know about your health, your political leanings, your love life. They know not just a lot about what you're doing, but they also have some significant insight into things that you're thinking about. And they've done a really good job of defining this debate by controlling the terms. Right? They say stuff like, we anonymize your data after 9 months, right? And what they mean by anonymize is that they drop the last octet of your IP address in their logs, right? So that's not anonymity, but they've done a good job of defining it as anonymity such that they can just say, we anonymize your data. They've also done this masterful thing with the Google dashboard, right? Where they're like, yeah, we take your privacy really seriously, so we're going to put it under control. And so the interesting things about this for me is, one, they obviously don't show you all of the things that they know about you. They just show you the most obvious things. But two, in order to participate in a private experience with Google, you now have to be tracked, right? Like you have to maintain a cookie, a session cookie, and always visit them or whatever, and have an account and all this stuff in order to maintain privacy, which is this nice inversion that I think that they've done. And they've warned us, right? Eric Schmidt, the CEO of Google, warned us that if there's something you don't want anyone to know, maybe you shouldn't be doing it in the first place. And then the other thing that we've learned, there was these Aurora attacks, right? And it seems likely that they were largely about intercept, right? That one thing that we learned is that it seems as if Google is running intercept systems on their network for law enforcement. And then other eavesdroppers who don't have a legal backing, maybe foreign nationals, wanted access to those same intercept systems. And so I think this is a trend that we're going to see, that as more and more information accumulates in these distinct places, that they're going to become more and more valuable targets for not just eavesdroppers with legal backings, but other eavesdroppers that wish to have access to that information as well. So I think it's going to become more and more dangerous. So one project that I've started working on is called Google Sharing. And the premise is that we want to try and reject this choice, this false choice between maintaining privacy and not using Google. We have to acknowledge that, okay, it's not really possible in this society to just not use Google or not communicate with people via Gmail or whatever. And so we want a way to continue to use Google services and still maintain privacy. And if they're not going to give that to us, then we need to provide it for ourselves. And so it's a two-part system. It's a Firefox add-on as well as a custom proxy server. And the way it works is that the add-on sits in your browser and it watches all of your normal internet traffic, right? And anything that is just normal internet stuff just goes directly to the internet, totally unmolested, nothing has changed, there's no performance implications. But then if it sees a request for a Google service that does not require a login, so these are things like Google Search, Google Images, Google News, Google Products, Google Maps, but not things like Google Mail or Google Checkout, then it siphons off that request and passes it up to a Google Sharing proxy server. The Google Sharing proxy server maintains a pool of identities. And these identities are basically just a set of unique HTTP headers. They're sort of like the fingerprint of your web browser, as well as a cookie that was issued by Google. And so it has this pool, and then when a request comes in, it randomly selects an identity from the pool, takes all of the identifying information off the request, tacks the identifying information from the identity onto the request, and passes it up to Google. Then Google processes that, responds back to the proxy server, and we relay it back to the client. So from Google's perspective, there's just this large corporate NAT that has this one IP address, and there's all these clients behind it. And there's all these cookies that seem totally normal. But from the client's perspective, it's impossible, or should be impossible, for Google to identify individual clients, because these cookies are constantly being passed around between users, and your IP address is obscured by the proxy server. Additionally, we encrypt this first link between the client and the Google Sharing proxy using SSL. So even for services that Google does not give SSL access to, like Google Maps and Google News and Google Products and stuff like that, you get SSL protection on the client side. And so how does it look? Well, it looks totally normal. It's basically imperceptible. There's extremely low latency. You don't even really notice that this is running. You can use any of Google's services like Google Maps or Google News or Google Search or whatever. It all happens totally transparently. The only difference is that in the bottom right-hand corner, there's a little status telling you that Google Sharing is enabled. We've also now gotten kind of a win from Google, because what they've done is they've given us SSL search, where you can now issue search queries to Google using SSL. And so what we can do now is actually have the clients prefetch cookies from the Google Sharing proxy server and then make an SSL connection all the way to Google that's just bounced through the proxy server, so that even the proxy server itself would not be able to look at the search data. So you don't have to trust the proxy to not look at your requests either. So you get this